Hi guys, I got a request for this question here, 11B. So I'm just going to take a copy of that and I'm going to do it out for you just to show you. Okay. Now this is all to do with deduction, okay? And I suppose, so it's if one thing equals another and another thing equals this, then you make deductions from that piece of information. So that's what this is here, okay? So if we're given here as follows, right? So you're asked to solve, or sorry, you're asked to, it's just B I was asked for, right? So it says here fx, right? So fx is a function, and it's given as x squared minus 1 times x minus 1. Okay, now it says show why this here is greater or equal than 0 in the following cases. Okay, so 1, if x is equal to 0, well, if x is equal to 0, 0 minus 1 is minus 1, 0 minus 1 is minus 1, and minus 1 is minus 1 is positive. Okay, so if that was the case, you'd have 0 minus 1, 0 minus 1, and that's equal to 1, which is greater or equal than 0. So that's part 1. Okay, fairly straightforward to start off. Now, the next part we had was if x is equal to 1. So if x is equal to 1, well, what you get then is 1 minus 1 times 1 minus 1, which is equal to 0, and 0 is greater or equal to 0. It's equal to 0. So that's how you can say that one there. So the first two are fairly straightforward. Now the next two just involve a little bit of factorising. Okay, so we're asked if x is greater than 1, right? So if x here is greater than 1, just greater than 1, sorry. So if it's greater than 1, right, then x squared would also be greater than 1. So if you take 1.01, or the smallest number, but it's going to be a fraction bigger, right? X squared would be greater than 1, so therefore x squared minus 1 would be greater than 1. And x minus 1 would be greater than 1. So if you have two numbers that are both greater than 1, when you multiply them, they're both going to be both. So if you look here, x squared minus 1 is greater than 1, x minus 1. So you think of two numbers that are greater than 1, that means they're positive, they're greater than 1, which means they have to be greater than 0. Okay? So therefore you can say, when x is greater than 1, x squared minus 1 times x minus 1 has to be greater or equal to 0. It's that one there. And the fourth one, okay? The fourth and fifth one kind of link in together, okay? And this is just a slight thing, and it's where you just change this up slightly. So what you have is, it's telling you now that x is between 0 and 1. So it's going to be 0.4, 0.5, or whatever else. So if you think 0.5 squared, okay, it's going to be 0.25. So you've got a negative number here, okay? And you've got a negative number here. But how do we prove this? Well, the way we prove it for definite, because you can't just pick a number, it has to be for any number. So if I take x squared minus 1, okay, that can be written as, because that's the difference of two squares, x plus 1 times x minus 1. So now if I take my x squared minus 1 times x minus 1, so x squared minus 1 times x minus 1, so look, instead of writing x squared minus 1, I put in x plus 1, x minus 1. So I'm going to have x plus 1 times x minus 1 times x minus 1. So now I have x plus 1 times x minus 1 squared. So x is greater than 0 but less than 1. So that's going to be 1 point something. And this is a squared number, so it has to be positive. So if you've got 1 point something multiplied by a positive number, it's going to be greater or equal than 0. Okay? Since x plus 1 is greater than 1, and x minus 1 squared has to be greater than 0 because it's a squared number. Therefore, x plus 1 times x minus 1 squared must be greater or equal than 0. Okay, and similarly then, right? So similarly from this here. So I'm not going to do too much to change this up. Sorry, forward 1 second. So we just take that bit out there. So we're going to leave this bit here because it's the same thing I'm going to do. All they're changed, the only parameters that change is this here. So it's -1. Okay, so now it could be minus a number, right? Now if you think about it, 1 is bigger than any number here. So the negative number, which means x plus 1. So even though x could be negative, it's not less than 1. So x plus 1 in this case is greater or equal than 0. It's positive. And again, no matter what the number in here is, because it's squared, it has to be greater or equal than 0. So if you've got two numbers that are greater than or equal to 0, or two positive numbers, when you multiply them, the answer has to be positive. So therefore, x plus 1 times x minus 1 squared has to be greater than 0. So that's part B there. Hope you find that solution okay.